The aftermath of World War II left the United States as the sole nuclear power, prompting fear and strategic urgency in China. Mao Zedong, aware of the nuclear imbalance, saw the development of an atomic bomb as essential for China's security, especially with rising tensions during the Korean War and the Taiwan Strait crises. While China initially sought Soviet assistance to build its nuclear capabilities, the relationship was fraught with limitations and setbacks. Despite these challenges, China pursued its nuclear ambitions with determination, culminating in the successful detonation of its first atomic bomb in 1964. This marked a transformative moment, altering the global balance of power and establishing China as a nuclear-armed nation. This video explains how China faced challenges and overcome it to make atomic bomb. After World War II, the United States was the only country with nuclear weapons, creating an imbalance in global power dynamics. During the Chinese Civil War, Mao Zedong feared that the U.S. might intervene and use its atomic bomb. This concern motivated Mao to seek a nuclear deterrent for China. So in December 1949, he visited Soviet leader Joseph Stalin to negotiate China's entry into the Soviet bloc and sought Soviet protection under a nuclear umbrella. The Soviets were hesitant, and while the Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship provided general assistance, it never explicitly mentioned nuclear weapons during the Korean War, 1950 to 1953. As American forces approached the Chinese border, Mao feared a U.S. invasion and the use of atomic weapons against China. Although the Americans threatened nuclear attacks, they did not materialize, but these threats still deeply alarmed Chinese leadership. Throughout the 1950s, tensions between the U.S. and China continued, exacerbating China's desire for nuclear weapons. Comments from American officials about using nuclear bombs on Chinese soil heightened Chinese fears. This was evident during the first Taiwan Strait crisis, 1954 to 1955, where U.S. military leaders recommended nuclear strikes, though President Eisenhower ultimately chose not to use them. In 1954, the U.S. signed a mutual defense treaty with the Republic of China, Taiwan, which the Communist Chinese government viewed as a direct threat, fueling Mao's urgency to develop China's own atomic bomb as a counterbalance to U.S. influence in the region. Initially, Mao Zedong turned to the Soviet Union for assistance in developing nuclear capabilities. The Soviets, however, were reluctant to share their nuclear secrets. After Stalin's death in 1953, Nikita Khrushchev took power and sought to improve Sino-Soviet relations. When Mao asked Khrushchev for help in developing nuclear weapons in 1954, Khrushchev was surprised and attempted to dissuade China, urging them to focus on economic development instead. However, the Chinese persisted, and a compromise was reached. The Soviets agreed to assist China with peaceful atomic energy projects, leading to the signing of the Sino-Soviet Atomic Cooperation Treaty in 1955. Under the treaty, the Soviet Union provided China with a small nuclear power plant and other scientific equipment, such as a cyclotron. Soviet scientists also helped China explore uranium reserves in Xinjiang, a crucial step in China's path toward nuclear self-sufficiency. Initially, Mao Zedong turned to the Soviet Union for assistance in developing nuclear capabilities. The Soviets, however, were reluctant to share their nuclear secrets. After Stalin's death in 1953, Nikita Khrushchev took power and sought to improve Sino-Soviet relations. When Mao asked Khrushchev for help in developing nuclear weapons in 1954, Khrushchev was surprised and attempted to dissuade China, urging them to focus on economic development instead. However, the Chinese persisted, and a compromise was reached. The Soviets agreed to assist China with peaceful atomic energy projects, leading to the signing of the Sino-Soviet Atomic Cooperation Treaty in 1955. Under the treaty, the Soviet Union provided China with a small nuclear power plant and other scientific equipment, such as a cyclotron. Soviet scientists also helped China explore uranium reserves in Xinjiang, a crucial step in China's path toward nuclear self-sufficiency. China's nuclear program attracted many highly educated Chinese-born scientists who had studied or worked in the West. Despite their loyalty, these intellectuals were often targeted as rightists by radical elements of the Chinese Communist Party, a persecution so severe that Premier Zhou Enlai had to intervene to stop it in 1956. While the Soviets initially seemed open to transferring atomic technology, they were hesitant to share knowledge of nuclear weapon design. Despite signing an agreement in October 1957 that promised comprehensive aid for atomic energy, including a teaching model of an atomic bomb, the actual assistance fell short of China's expectations. Khrushchev later claimed that the Soviet Union gave China nearly everything it asked for, but this was only partly true. For example, a Soviet lecture in July 1958, meant to teach the structure and assembly of nuclear weapons, revealed little useful information. It featured only a basic sketch on a blackboard without any detailed documents or formulas, and the audience consisted largely of administrative personnel rather than scientists. This superficial approach frustrated Chinese scientists, who were looking for more substantive data to accelerate their nuclear weapons program. The Soviet Union's partial willingness to share nuclear technology was shaped by geopolitical circumstances. By 1957, the USSR needed China's support to deal with the political crises in Eastern Europe, especially the Hungarian uprising and unrest in Poland. In return for this loyalty, Khrushchev agreed to provide more nuclear assistance, albeit in a limited and controlled manner, reflecting Soviet concerns about China's growing ambitions. The Soviet Union provided substantial technological support to China in developing nuclear weapons, but the extent and effectiveness of this transfer remained debated. For instance, the Soviets helped China in prospecting uranium, aiding them with aerial surveys and setting up labs. However, the Chinese later claimed that this aid was not very helpful, as the Soviets directed them to prospect in sedimentary soils, whereas China's richest uranium deposits were in granite and igneous rock. China's uranium mines in Xinjiang were substantial, and although Soviet assistance helped in identifying these resources, the mismatch in geological understanding shows the limitations of the aid. The Soviets gave China some of their most advanced missile technology, including the R-12 intercontinental ballistic missile. This is significant because the R-12 had a range of 2,000 kilometers, which could threaten other nations, including the Soviet Union itself. Sergei Khrushchev, the son of Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, recalled a moment where his father, after deciding to give China the R-12, expressed concerns that this weapon could eventually be used against the Soviet Union. China initially pursued a dual-track method for building nuclear bombs, focusing on both uranium-235 and plutonium. For the uranium-based bomb, China set up a gaseous diffusion plant with Soviet guidance in Gansu province. This technology, although outdated now, was essential in separating the lighter uranium-235 isotope needed for a nuclear weapon from uranium-238. In parallel, for the plutonium bomb, China constructed a nuclear fuel reactor based on Soviet designs, located in the same Gansu province. This reactor converted uranium-238 into plutonium-239, which was then processed and used to make the plutonium bomb at U.S. Reconnaissance spotted China's uranium enrichment facility in Lanzhou as early as August 1959, showcasing the progress made with Soviet assistance. The plutonium separation process, however, was dangerous and toxic, but the Soviet design helped streamline this critical part of bomb production. After World War II, the Soviet Union initially provided significant technical and material aid to China in the development of its nuclear program. However, relations between China and the Soviet Union deteriorated over political and strategic disagreements. One example was the dispute over the transfer of a nuclear bomb prototype from the Soviet Union to China, which faced endless delays throughout 1958. Soviet security advisors repeatedly demanded changes to the storage facility for the bomb, leading to frustration and distrust on the Chinese side. By June 1959, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev sent a letter formally ending military cooperation with China, pulling out Soviet advisors from Chinese nuclear projects. This culminated in the full withdrawal of Soviet aid by July 1960. The Soviet decision was partly due to Mao Zedong's actions during the Second Taiwan Strait crisis, 1958, which heightened tensions and risked nuclear conflict. Stalin had previously believed that Mao's provocations aimed to incite global conflict, hoping that the US and USSR would fight each other, leaving China as a lesser target. In response to the Soviet withdrawal, China launched Project 596, named after the shameful Soviet withdrawal in June 1959. This project aimed for China to independently develop nuclear weapons, with a plan to master the technology within 3 years and accumulate a stockpile of bombs in 8 years. One challenge China faced was the abandonment of the dual-track approach of developing both plutonium and uranium-based bombs. Given the pressures of the Great Leap Forward, China focused solely on uranium-235, an approach requiring intense technical expertise and resources. Despite these difficulties, China's uranium enrichment facility in Lanzhou made progress, and by mid-1963, Chinese scientists were successfully isolating uranium-235. After Soviet advisors left, Chinese engineers had to fill the gap by sourcing materials and completing the technical work themselves. For instance, when the Soviets left, they took with them critical components like a special lubricant used in gaseous diffusion pumps, forcing Chinese scientists to develop alternatives. The withdrawal of aid coincided with the hardships of the Great Leap Forward, which included widespread famine and social unrest. Despite these challenges, plant leaders like Wang Zhenshu pressed on, pushing the workers to continue their efforts even under food shortages. By 1964, the project culminated in the creation of a functional nuclear bomb, and in October 1964, China successfully detonated its first atomic bomb, becoming the fifth nuclear-armed nation in the world. This was a monumental achievement considering the withdrawal of Soviet aid, and it showcased China's ability to overcome both technical and political obstacles. The challenge of using explosives to compress subcritical plutonium into supercriticality, a technique used in the implosion-type atomic bomb. The bomb dropped on Nagasaki, Fat Man, used this method. The Chinese, however, opted for uranium-235 instead of plutonium. An implosion-type bomb uses shaped charges of conventional explosives to compress nuclear material like uranium or plutonium into a supercritical mass, where nuclear chain reactions rapidly multiply. Precise synchronization is critical to ensure the detonation compresses the core uniformly, as any deviation can result in inefficient or failed fission. Unlike the Los Alamos team, which used cutting-edge technology for their time, the Chinese scientists relied on hand calculators and rudimentary tools to solve complex equations for their bomb design. In 1962, Chinese physicists and engineers were able to master implosion physics using only basic tools, a testament to their persistence and resourcefulness. This mirrors other historical achievements, like how early aviation pioneers built functional airplanes with limited materials. China's successful nuclear test in 1964, referred to as Project 596, shocked both the U.S. and the Soviet Union. U.S. intelligence had underestimated China's capabilities, partly because they assumed plutonium was needed for a bomb. China, however, used uranium-235. Confusing Western analysts, the U.S. and the USSR had invested billions in their nuclear programs, supported by vast industrial infrastructure. In contrast, China's achievement with fewer resources and indigenous development surprised many. Similarly, during World War II, the Soviet T-34 tank shocked Nazi Germany with its simplicity and efficiency despite Russia's industrial limitations. U.S. President Kennedy had concerns about China's nuclear ambitions, fearing that it would lead to the spread of communism across Southeast Asia. Though some in his administration advocated military intervention, it never materialized. The U.S. viewed the Chinese nuclear program similarly to how they viewed the Soviet Union's nuclear development a decade earlier, with anxiety about the global balance of power. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 had shown how nuclear weapons could bring superpowers to the brink of war, influencing decisions about confronting China's program. If you find this video informative, please like this video and subscribe our channel. It gives us encouragement to bring you more such videos.